Hello, everyone, and welcome to Haze's Higher Learning. I'm your host, Ashlee Haze, and today's episode is called Balancing the Scales. Today, we're having a conversation on social justice and reform in education and policy. As you all know, Haze's Higher Learning was founded as a space to create accessibility in education to people in marginalized groups. And I'm also supremely passionate about social justice, which is restoring justice where it was lost or taken. And we are now in the middle of a revolution and uprising where people of color are demanding fair treatment in policy and fair budgeting and education. And so I have invited a very, very good friend of mine, Mr. Denver Terrance, and I'm going to read Denver's bio and then introduce you all to our special guest for the day. Denver Terrance is the founder and lead architect at Cure Architects, having founded the full service design studio in 2014 in Prince George's County, Maryland. A native son of New Roads, Louisiana, Denver is a registered architect. Denver served in the United States Navy and the Civil Engineer Corps from 2001 to 2008. Denver Terrance earned a bachelor from Southern University and a Master of Design Studies in Sustainable Design from Boston Architectural College. Denver is a member of the American Institute of Architects and National Organization of Minority Architects. Denver Terrance is the founder and president of the Denver Smith Foundation. The Denver Smith Foundation was established in 2019 as a 501c3 with the mission to honor the life and legacy of Denver Smith by providing equitable education opportunities and resources to students of vulnerable populations. That sounds like something I could get behind. Mr. Terrance, how are you?
Very good, very good. That was a very good introduction. Thank you so much. I'm excited about being here and having this conversation with you.
I'm excited to have you here. And I think it's dope that we came to the table because I think the work we do at Haze's Higher Learning is very similar to the work you do at the Denver Smith Foundation, where we're both passionate about education. And so my audience probably is not familiar with your work, but I want you to talk a little bit about what caused you to found the foundation. So you're an architect, and then you decide you want to do something bigger in the world. And you founded the Denver Smith Foundation in response to your personal experiences with police brutality, and your foundation offers educational support to people of color. Do you mind talking about what inspired you to start the foundation?
Sure, sure. So being named after my uncle, Denver Smith, it's like I was born into the fight against police brutality and state-sponsored killing of Black people. Mm-hmm. So to tell the story, my uncle was a student at Southern University, and on November 16, 1972, he was killed by a police officer, a sheriff deputy to be specific. Mm. The entire shooting was captured on color video. I make mention to say that it's on color video because in 1972, I was not here, and my assumption was that color video technology wasn't available at the time. So the first time I saw it, I was obviously devastated about watching my uncle being shot, but also surprised that it was recorded in color. Mm-hmm. And so that was, how I got my name, being named after my uncle. And so with that, there were probably thousands of milestones that happened throughout my life that led me to this point of starting the foundation. I, too, as mentioned in the introduction, attended Southern University and graduated from the School of Architecture there. And while being there, I knew lots of great students who dropped out of school and ended their college career only because they did not have enough money. Mm. So that was, one of the things that hurt me a lot going through school, seeing students not be able to pursue their dream of getting a degree, and the only obstacle was funding. And then time goes on, and another major moment that led me to this point was the shooting of Philando Castile, and hearing his 4-year-old daughter, after seeing the police shoot her father and watching her mother justifiably devastated. This 4-year-old girl was composed, calm, and consoling her mother in that moment. And to me, I felt I just felt so much for this girl. Hearing her say that, like, literally changed me. And it
Mm-hmm.
led to the point to where I felt indebted to her. I felt the state, the government was, owed her.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that, just from seeing what happened after my uncle was killed, knowing that it was unlikely that the state was going to deliver justice and provide restitution. And so I felt obligated that we have to do what we need to do to help kids like her
Mm-hmm.
achieve their dreams and goals, and also students that I had the pleasure of going to school with at Southern University. So that led me to, this point of saying, hey, we have to do something. What is it can we do? So the foundation was started with the mission of honoring my uncle and his legacy, highlighting social and restorative justice, and also providing scholarship money to students.
And so, how is providing scholarship money to students social justice? Talk to me about that.
Well, so we know that education have afforded a lot of opportunities to Black people,
Mm-hmm.
and it have changed Black people around the world, specifically HBCUs. So, I always say HBCUs is one of America's greatest institutions. I think without HBCUs, there's no Martin Luther King, there's no Thurgood Marshall, and so many others. A lot of the leaders of the African countries came here to study and fought their liberation from the colonizers in Africa were HBCU graduates. So HBCUs have done a lot for Black people and here in America, and also African people around the world.
And I'll be honest, Denver, like before I met you, I didn't have anyone close to me who I spoke to at length about the importance of HBCUs. And for those of you all listening who aren't familiar with the acronym, that's a historically Black college or university. And so, Denver, what makes you so passionate about them and the current, and talk to me about the current state of
So,
HBCUs, because I don't know much
so
about them.
exactly. So there's a, about 100 between 100 105 HBCUs in the United States. These HBCUs started historically because Black people, African people of African descent, was not allowed to attend other schools. So um, the these schools were started to give them an opportunity for higher education. Um, they also excelled in sports and academics, and so these institutions now are faced with financial hardships, and in a lot of cases unfairly. So, for example, the United States government, the federal government, funds provides a lot of funding for schools. However, a small amount of that funding actually gets to HBCUs. And one example of that is Johns Hopkins University, located in Baltimore, Maryland, receives over $2 billion annually of federal funding, 2 billion with the B.
Yeah. A lot
While
of zeros.
while the exactly while the 100 plus HBCUs only receive about $350 million annually from the federal government.
Wait a second.
And so,
No, 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 no. No, no, no. You don't just breeze past that because I'm catching up here, right? So you mean to tell me that this one hospital college, medical college,
exactly.
gets
That,
6 times as much money as 100 schools combined?
yes, yes. And that's one school. There's Stanford and other schools, predominantly white institutions, that receive significantly more money than the over 100 HBCUs. And it's catastrophic for this reason. So these HBCUs who get a very, very small amount of money produce people in industry that pay taxes. Their tax dollars don't end up at their schools. And
Hmm.
we have a further gap in inequity to the point to where I would equate it to slavery. It's the same principle of using the talent and the bodies of Black people to enrich white people and make their lives easier. So these Black professionals graduate, go off to earn money through business and working for folks. They contribute to society. Their talent is used, but the money that is created from their talent don't find it fairly and equitably into their institution. And that's just on the federal level. On the state level, we have the same problem.
Wow. Yeah, we know we have it on the state level with the disparities in education and urban schools and overcrowding. But that is an astounding piece of information because what I think makes systems work is lack of data and lack of understanding the data we're given. And so to hear that one school is getting 6 times as much as 100 combined, that is just, it's outrageous to me. It's outrageous.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And another point too is that HBCUs also provide an opportunity for students who may not be able to get into these other schools for financial reasons or others, but HBCUs is there for these students. For example, myself personally, I am not sure there were other schools open and available to me. And there are lots of people who are in or what was in my shoes that have been able to continue education beyond high school and achieve a college degree only because HBCUs are there and available to them.
Mm. Hmm. That is just so interesting to me because I was raised very much, just pick the school that specializes in what you want to do well. And I think the older I get and the more I learn about the value of HBCUs, the more I wish I'd gone to one. And if I get the chance to go back to school, I'm gonna go to one. And so
I would
go
I
ahead.
highly recommend
You highly recommend it.
that.
I know you highly recommend it. And so I want to talk a little bit about because I don't want to miss this point. Your family is a victim of police brutality. Your secondary victim. They took someone who was a part of your family. Now, I want to ask, how did that affect your family from the 70s going forward? But also, have you noticed any progress that's worth noting or substantial in policing and police brutality?
That's a very good point. And so, as I mentioned, I was not here. I was not born
Right.
yet at the time when my uncle was killed. However, I was able to see the impacts of how it impacted my family to the point to where, last year I had a conversation with my aunts and uncles, and it's been over 40 years, and it is still visible in their face. It's still recognizable in their voice, the pain and the hurt that they've gone through, not only from the standpoint of losing their brother in the way that they did, but they also were not welcome. There was not this welcoming arm wrapped around them from the state, from the university. And so, for example, there's stories of my grandmother in attempt to fight this or seek out some justice. And she had a hard time finding one lawyer in Louisiana that was willing to take this case
Wow.
and try to fight for justice for her son that was killed by the police. And she ultimately was unsuccessful. And it's like today, we are like literally today, people are marching throughout the world for justice for Mr. Floyd, George Floyd, after being choked by a Minneapolis police officer. And and I feel as though just from being in the streets, marching with the people, it seems like something is happening. This feels different. And while I want to believe that we're making progress, that things are going to get better, we definitely have a long way to go as a country in rooting out racism and ending state-sponsored killing of Black people.
Which is a very eloquent way to put it because that's exactly what it is. And I think when we frame it as something else, as an accident or an isolated incident, we ignore the system that implements um,
Right.
implements.
And I specifically call it state-sponsored terror killing because the state, that's a state-owned gun. It's a state-owned
Mm.
bullet. The person that killed Mr. Floyd is usually is works for the state. So we are providing the labor, like we're paying for the people that's supposed to be protecting us. We're paying for the bullets and everything that they're used as tools to end the life of these black people. And in a lot of cases, to make it to add more insult to the injury, is that if possible, there is some type of restitution paid to the family. It comes from the taxpayers. So in theory or in reality, people of the community pay for tools and pay people to kill them, and then they pay again for the
Yeah,
mistake of the person who killed them.
yeah. Because then when they settle, they're taking it out of our money and not the police operating budget.
Exactly. And I said mistake because usually
That's the
that's
phrase
how
they
they
use.
get
Yeah.
off. Exactly. It's never intentional. It's never, the police is rarely in error.
And that's interesting. Instead of putting that money in education and mental health first responders, instead of
Exactly.
brutality first, brutal
Exactly.
first response. And so you have an initiative. I was checking out the Denver Smith Foundation page, and you've got this initiative about create change, CRE, the number 8 change. Do you mind explaining why what that initiative is and its importance?
Yes. So with the with what was happening in Washington D.C. protests, some call it looting and rioting. I call it an uprising or
Mm-hmm.
rebellion. Because of the rebellion, businesses thought it would be prudent to put plywood over their storefronts and their glass, doors and everything. So throughout the city of DC, there's these plywood, sheets of plywood all over the
Mm-hmm.
city. And so, and it was this initiative was a short fuse thing, 40 about 48 hours from right now. A group of artists, art collective, muralists, we pulled these people together to paint images and messages and create some community art on these plywoods. And
Mm.
so what we've been able to do is use these use these boards to create art and have memorials set up for the plenty of people that have been killed by the police to the point to where we were doing 2 a day. So yesterday we did, day before yesterday we did 2. We did 2 today, and they're posted on our Instagram at the Denver Smith Foundation Instagram. And we've been overwhelmed with requests of, hey, can you paint our building? Can you put something here for us in showing that we're in support of the Black Lives Matter movement? So the initiative, the Create Change with the number 8, is something that has been um, impactful short term in the short term, and I'm expecting that we're going to continue to push this narrative in celebrating these the lives of these people, highlighting their lives, and creating something beautiful within the city, honoring them in that way.
Got it.
So Breonna Taylor has a spot. Denver Smith has a spot. We have obviously Mr. George Floyd has a spot. And so we're going to continue to do this until the boards come down, until we run out of funding or run out of
I
time.
like it. So essentially, the art becomes activism, which is my question.
Exactly. It provides an opportunity for artists to support the movement by
I
using
love
their
it. And
talent.
so the number 8 is significant. Can you tell our listeners why?
No question. No question. The number 8 is significant because of it's a marker of the number of minutes that the officer put his full body weight on the neck of Mr. George Floyd. And so we, create CRE, the number 8 change was specifically and for that reason, to highlight the 8+ minutes that they murdered a man on camera.
Wow. And every time I say it, it doesn't make it any easier to process. It just doesn't. So, here at Hazel's Higher Learning, one of the principles we believe in is that social justice is about tangible solutions and tangible ways to solve problems. What does that social justice look like to you from a policy standpoint and a social standpoint? And do you think there are any short term or long term solutions that we should explore?
Yes, there's plenty, and because systemic racism, because these policies and systems have been in place for so long, they're so entrenched in our society that the solutions are going to take a lot of heavy lifting and a long time. And there's categories, and there's all like, especially during this point in time, there's a bunch of nonprofits and social justice movement activists that has these lists of things that they want to do. And so one of the things that the Denver Smith Foundation is going to do, we are we're instead of focusing on big things that people say like police reform. Yes, that sounds good. Like defunding the police, and that's the definition of that is still like being worked out as we speak. I think what we're going to ask our supporters to do is do things like contact your congressperson and tell them that you want them to push and support HR 40. Specific items like that is what we're going to do and ask folks that support us to do. And HR 40, for the listeners, it is simply the bill that has been written to study the impacts of slavery, of Jim Crow, of African people starting from 1619 when the first slave ships arrived on the shore, and just to study how to remedy that issue. And so I believe that if we can get something like that pushed and passed, then we could, at the same time go into a lot of these other things that have been ongoing. So it's things like that we're pushing to do. From a long-term perspective, what I see as what social justice and looks like, it looks like the America that works for everyone, and we are we are and I believe that look does not stop at the shores of the United States. So I believe that we'll get to a point to where, hopefully, to where America, with a lot of work, effort, and time, are living up to the promises, and they've restored Black people and African people of African descent to a hold position. While and after that point, Black people need to be reaching out, making alliances, connections with people from the African diaspora, obviously in Africa and also in South America and other parts of the world. And I think that's what a long-term, holistic social justice ideal look like for me, to where these people who've been wronged historically by various countries and colonizers are made whole, and all of them are made whole. Not just me, not just African people in America, but African people throughout the world.
And does that include reparations or something similar?
I believe it has to. I believe that the financial impacts of what has happened to African people around the world has impacted everyone. It's impacted European countries and white people positively, and it has impacted Africa and African people negatively. And so we have to restore that. We have to rectify that in order to move forward as a country and definitely as a world society.
I actually, in my mind, reparations is just reconciling. It's counting the books. It's doing the math and restoring what you took.
Yes,
What you
yes,
took by force.
and it's something that is not foreign. I mean, in America, it happens all the time. There's civil
Absolutely.
suits all the time.
They
There's
dismissed
there's
us.
there's groups of people who've gotten um, money directly from the government, and I know that it's not an easy thing. I believe that while white people, uh, for in large part love racism, they also love money, and I think trying to get them to come to grips with that our country has a debt to pay is something that we're going to have to do. And a perfect example of that is a few years ago, HBCUs in the state of Maryland sued the state of Maryland because
Hmm.
it was clear that the state of Maryland did not fund those HBCUs. I think it was four of them equitably in comparison to the predominantly white institutions. And so it went up to higher courts. It was determined that the state owed these HBCUs this amount of money, and the state, for years, drug it out in order not to pay them that money. They, from what I understand, have recently come to an agreement and are going to give them the money, but it's something that is not going to be an easy thing, and it's going to take a lot of convincing and time. But I think it's necessary in order for us to achieve justice.
Yeah, and that's what we believe at Higher Learning, that justice is not the problem wasn't created overnight. The injustice didn't happen overnight. So it takes arduous work. And I think for me, I get frustrated where socially a lot of that work still falls on the shoulders of African American people to do the
Exactly.
research, to prove our case, to say you owe us. We didn't get that much say so um, 300 years ago. We didn't get that.
Right.
And so that is also, I think, a point to make about social justice. And I also wanted you to touch really quickly before we go, as an architect, as a Black architect, I could say like one in a million, but what are those numbers like? Because I was really astounded to find how few Black architects there are.
Yes, it's we should be embarrassed. But right now in America, there's less than 2% of the architects happen to be Black. So we have communities where Black people live, and these communities are not designed by them in large cases because of historical issues, but currently because we don't have enough Black architects that are designing communities, that are building buildings, that are in that arena for Black people. So while Black people make up, 13, 14, 50% of the American population, we only make up 2% of the architecture profession. And that's very, very low when you compare it to doctors and lawyers and teachers and other professions. And I think that has an impact on Black communities for this reason. So communities designed by Black people have an impact in almost every area. So it has an impact in economics. So if
Mm-hmm.
there's Black architects designing for the community, then that's an influx of money for that business that's working in that community. It also provides jobs for construction and other things, and business
Mm-hmm.
owners from that
Designers.
regard.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so um, what makes it important is that there's studies that show that neighborhoods that have certain features and amenities have less crime. For
Mm-hmm.
example, a tree lined street has less crime than a street without trees.
Mm-hmm.
And something simple as connecting people to nature impacts their mood, impacts their
Mm-hmm.
behavior, and could reduce the amount of crime in those neighborhoods. But because nobody's designing or caring about those neighborhoods, things like that
Mm-hmm.
don't happen. So, in fact, what we have similar to our entire system is we as African people are forced to comply and move and live in something that was not designed for them. And so, in fact, in some cases,
Or
it was
by.
designed to hurt
Mhm.
them.
Yes.
So, so instead of the community and these systems designed to benefit, to enhance their life, to make things better for them, we are not doing that because in this case, those designers don't exist. Those architects are not there. And they're not there because of institutional racism, because the schools that produce architects are generally HBCUs. There's HBCUs that have lost their architecture program purely because of funding. And so that's how not having architects impact the community in various ways, not just crime and also economically.
And is that how you get public housing that looks like prison institutions
Exactly,
or can feel
exactly.
like one?
Exactly. If the people designing it don't understand, don't have an idea of the people, or don't care about the people, then it's likely that the building will respond that way, and the
Hmm.
people will in turn respond that way. So you get housing communities that don't reflect the people, don't look like the people, and it's wonder in a lot of cases why they look the way they look because it's not for them. It wasn't built for them. It wasn't designed for them. It wasn't built with them in mind. And so it's not taken care of. It just doesn't work that way. And we need to do a better job in the architecture profession to make sure that we improve that.
Yeah, and I like to see it. I like to see it. Thank you so much, Denver, for sitting with me for this conversation. I think that it has done some good work, and I hope our listeners are thinking now about ways you can locally show up and be a part of social justice and think about the ways that racism shows up in so many and so many parts of our lives in education and our housing and the cities that are policing. And so, as you know, this season will center on social justice in various arenas, various topics and conversations. And so, thank you, Mr. Terrance, for coming and talking to us about your lovely foundation. You all make sure you follow the Denver Smith Foundation and make sure you follow Cure Architects. And if you're ever in the DC area, look out for Denver because he's doing some really good work in the world. So, Mr. Terrance, I did not send this in the prep email, but I usually ask our guests, I usually give my listeners a song of the week, some music to get them going. I would love to offer you the opportunity to tell us your favorite song or the song that you have in rotation.
That's tough. Because I have a very wide variety of musical selections. So I
Yes,
listen
I'm very clear.
from hip hop music to gospel music. I also listen to a lot of speeches. Right now, what's big on my rotation, believe it or not, is speeches from two, some people would say opposing viewpoints, but two of my favorite people, and that's Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. I've been listening to both of their speeches over the past few days. So I won't offer a music collection, but I'll definitely offer those. So you can't go wrong with Dr. Martin Luther King or the Honorable Malcolm X.
Okay, all right. Well, you all stream a speech, and I'm laughing because I know that Denver will listen to New Orleans Bounce,
For
and
sure.
could be
Yep.
that could be an entire episode.
Yep.
So I'll take that.
Yep. R&B, Jodeci. It could be some of anything. You never know.
It could be so anything, but y'all Denver don't like comment, and I cannot understand for the life of me why.
So I wouldn't go that far. I like him as a person and as an activist, and I like his voice. I'm just not a fan of his music. That's all. It's cool.
It's not cool. That's not what this episode is about. Thank you so much, Mr. Terrence. You all make sure you follow Hazel's Higher Learning. Feel free to go onto the Anchor app and leave Denver a message. We have a voicemail feature on the Anchor app. We would love to keep this conversation going. I've told y'all in episode 1, I don't want to talk to myself all season. And although I don't mind talking to my homies, they want to hear from you all as well. So let us know how we're doing. Check out some content on the Hazel Higher Learning page, and you'll find links to Cure Architects and also the Denver Smiths Foundation. Thank you for tuning into Hazel's Higher Learning, where together we are learning better, doing better, and being better. You all have a wonderful week.